Hello, everyone. Welcome to the conversation with myself and David Hubert. Once again, we have an awesome guest who I haven't seen quite a long time, actually. I never had a chance to work with this person, but Christine has. And some of you know who Christine is. Christine's my significant other. She speaks very, very high praises of this particular man. We've had a couple interactions, but never had the pleasure of working together. But he's been everywhere, quite literally. I think quite literally. He's worked at Weta, he's worked at Ubisoft, which is where we almost kind of cross paths. And now he finds himself over Steamroller, and he's got we have a kind of a special, fresh off the hot off the press kind of announcement today we could talk about while he's on the stream. But before we do that, I'm going to bring in David and kind of do our thing. David.
Hey, Brent. So those stream has been rebranded as The Conversation.
I don't know. It was a natural evolution. It's like, welcome to the conversation. You know,
you just did it.
Thanks,
The
man.
Conversation 2022.
That's right. So there's only one conversation, and this is it. You're here now, listening to it. So if you're somewhere else, then you're in the wrong one. But it's all good. We're at the right one. That's all that matters.
Yep, sure are. Yeah, that'll be a fun one today. Actually, I knew, same for me, I kind of knew Aaron from the iAnimate days.
Yes.
We had him as one of our very early instructors at a time that, obviously as someone that very high caliber of animation, but both in VFX and game studios as well. So made him a very interesting candidate to have. Yeah. But I mean, even with the few interactions that I had with Aaron, I mean, his energy was always infectious. So I was definitely, I think not a couple of months ago when we had the discussion with Jalil Sadul from Steamroller right away after I started to prepare, like, hey, can we have Aaron eventually as well? And that's what's planned a few weeks.
Those seeds were planted long ago. Yeah, we're cultivating now, basically.
Yeah. So, and here we are. So looking forward to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I find it's interesting, Aaron. Like I think the thing that is kind of the craziest about Aaron is just how many different industries he's spent quite a bit of time in, and at a very high level. So, this will be a very well-rounded conversation, that's for sure. Let's bring him in and start this conversation. Start the conversation, not a conversation. Aaron, how are you? Welcome to the show, bud.
Hello, everybody. Awesome
hello.
to be here. Thank you so much.
It's nice to have you.
Thank you.
I would say you have one of the most chill, laid-back settings that we had in this conversation.
Yeah.
Listen, I'm in love with this couch, and the thing is I don't know if you knew this, but I'm normally in Vancouver, but I've actually spent the past month here in the studio at Steamroller. So
nice.
taking advantage of all the furniture, just lying out.
Good idea. If it's there, you should use it. You should be on it in some way. Yeah.
So, Aaron, something that we very rapidly chatted before our conversation was your early start, as we're all from, well, actually, Brent, technically you're from Toronto, but you almost started your career in Montreal, which is another thing that Aaron and I kind of started in Toronto, then moved to Montreal. And Aaron, so you started at Meteor Studio,
the infamous Meteor Studio.
Years. Yes, the infamous Meteor Studio. So, go ahead.
I was going to say, people are still calling it the infamous Meteor Studio.
Yeah, for sure. It still provokes stories.
Yeah. Yes. I remember when the lights were going out and they were shutting the doors. They wouldn't let anybody have their demo reels. And I'm like, this company's closing. We're not going to see our work like ever
not
again.
A good sign.
So I was one of the last guys to walk out the building. I saw my name on the CD label in a box, and I just went, see ya.
Yoink.
And walked right out the door. Yep.
Unapologetically.
There was no way. Unapologetically.
Right. So and that was the second time that you were at Meteor, right?
Correct. So I had Meteor was my first job. That was for TV dinosaur stuff. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I remember that show.
So speaking of dinosaurs, not to age yourself, but there's some in our audience that might not have even been born in 2001. So what do you remember from those very early days of?
What do I remember?
CG?
I remember. What do I remember? So I remember being extremely intimidated by the people that I was working with, because my very first job, actually a whole bunch of animators from Disney's Dinosaur had come over from California to work on the brand new shows that this new startup Meteor Studios was gonna be doing. So I was extremely intimidated from day one. My very first dailies, my first animation actually got laughs in the
That's
and
always a
that's
good sign.
bad, right? That's not a good sign. And
Oh,
so of
man.
course I was mortified. I was told after that the animation was good. It was just more for a Disney movie and not for a realistic documentary, which is what we were making. But yeah, no, I had great memories of animating dinosaurs. This was in the day where, you know, rigs were, there was basically no IK spine. This was all FK
Oh,
spine.
yeah.
Everything had to be counter animated. If you had to move the hips, you had to recounter animate everything up to the head. It was probably, I mean, I was super excited all the time. My energy was through the roof constantly. And I was constantly jazzed about the fact that I was making things move. It was
Yeah,
just
yeah.
like, look at that.
That's right.
But yeah.
Just to clarify, I feel like I remember the name of this series was Walking with Dinosaurs.
No, so Walking with Dinosaurs was BBC. So that was what
Oh,
we were built at Meteor to compete with, because Walking with
yeah.
Dinosaurs made a huge splash, right? So it was actually when dinosaurs roamed America.
Wait.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Someone wants to wave really quick.
Oh, look at her!
A live appearance right there. It's happening.
Amazing. Hi, Christine.
Yeah.
Go up and down the stairs.
Okay. And it's good news. Good news. My daughter does not have a broken leg, so everything's fine.
Oh, fantastic.
Perfect. All right, good. Stream can continue. Go ahead, Aaron.
Yeah,
Sorry.
no, it was when dinosaurs roamed America. So
that's
it was
right,
like,
okay.
yeah, it was just a doco to compete.
But it was meant
with
to.
the BBC type stuff.
That's right. It was literally meant to be the competitor in a way, right, to that market.
It was full live action shot with, you know,
Right.
comp and integration.
Because coming off the heel of Disney's Dinosaur, obviously dinosaurs was a hot topic, and Hollywood was just trying to produce dinosaur content, and Meteor was the Canadian answer to that question.
It was, I believe, maybe someone in the audience will correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure it was Framestore that did Walking with Dinosaurs for BBC.
I think you might be right. Okay.
And that was off the charts amazing. Like it was for the time, it was really, really good. And then this company came along, Meteor, and it was like 30 seconds of dinosaur animation a week. It was, the budgets weren't the same at all. There was no way to compete. Yeah, it was rough. I mean, if you go back and look at that stuff now, it's pretty rough.
Yeah. And just to come back to the story that we rapidly touch on. So Meteor is, and the way that it unfortunately ended after maybe 6-7 years of existence, like it was a very publicly, first of all, we're closing the studio, but there's a lot of people that were not paid. For Acer, and there's been a big lawsuits of employees put together to sue, and I know that some of them got paid. I don't know. So can you do a better job at explaining from being there what happened? Because it's one of the big stories that even 15 years after we still remember.
Is that right?
Part of the industry lore here in Montreal. Basically, everybody talks about it still.
I don't like, to be perfectly honest, I moved on with my life pretty quick after that. So in terms of the financials of why that company failed or who pulled the plug, it was an American owned company. If I remember correctly, it was owned by I'm trying to remember his name. It's like Saint Pierre or something like that, who was based out of LA. So I think it was a Discovery Channel and then his company kind of co-ownership. But in terms of why the company failed financially and how all of that happened, I have no idea. I was still pretty young in my career. But there were a lot of people that didn't get paid. There was a lot of court battles that went on for years. I do know that some people got their money and some people didn't. But in terms of why it went under, I don't really know.
But you, from the inside, I mean, just for your own experience, is that something that you were seeing come ahead of time, or was
no, it came out of nowhere. It came out of nowhere. It was literally like very, very fast. And also you have to remember that I hadn't been with Meteor for that 7. I went off and did other things and then only came back to Meteor because they had offered me work on one particular project, which was with Brendan Fraser, Journey to the Center of the Earth, the first one, before I think The Rock did the second one. And that was an opportunity to supervise creature work and for a film, so that was kind of what my sort of mental and creative investment was in going back to Meteor, was really to do that show.
In between both, I think that's when you went to Ubisoft and then EA, right? So it was your little venture in video game development. And I
Correct.
kind of recall one very entertaining discussion that we had about some of your frustration as an artist with gameplay animation, of being limited with so much different technical aspect of it. Is that, do I recall this part
No, you recall
correctly?
correctly. Yeah, I think, I've talked a lot about this in the past. It's like I feel like it was really hard to go from film
Hmm.
work and TV work to games,
Yeah.
because they're very different pipelines. They're very different creative workflows, because obviously in video games you have creative directors that their fundamental job is it fun to play,
Hmm.
and sometimes that can be at the expense of, does the animation look amazing?
Hmm.
Sometimes you'll speed stuff up in the engine, or you'll blend it in a way that is required for playability. But from my point of view as an animator who just wanted to animate, I'm focused on what it looks like on the final
Hmm.
product, up on a big screen and rendered. And I think for games it was very hard for me to go in
Hmm.
that direction than maybe the other way. I could see how, obviously, talking with a lot of game animators, they love the day-to-day process of the problem solving and the
Yeah.
puzzles of level design and how are we going to do this. I just wanted to animate.
Hmm.
I wanted to do really cool performances. So I found that there was a bit of a conflict there for me that resulted in some frustrations, where I
Hmm.
love the people I was working with. I thought Ubisoft was great, but the process wasn't for me,
Hmm.
really.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
You're not alone. A lot of people try to make that transition. They just can't. It's
it's
much more
tough.
difficult going the way you said, because it just, you can always, because when you, from the other perspective, going from games to TV or film, they may struggle with the quality. Like they might have a
Yeah,
hard time like bringing their quality bar up, but suddenly it feels like, whoa, we have more time, and there's no game designer telling me you have to like make it faster. It's like
yeah.
it can feel a lot more liberating than the other way around. And a lot of it has to do with, I feel like the it's not just the game industry. It's also some team cultures. Like you might have found yourself at a different company, like say Naughty Dog, where they do put the quality of the movement a little bit higher up in the sort of the importance level, and you might have
Yes.
had a much better experience. But I think you were working on Prince of Persia, right?
No, and that's the other thing. Actually, I
Oh,
wasn't on Prince of Persia, which just to be clear, like if I had been on a very animation centric type of
yeah, it
game,
might have
like
went a bit better,
creature work, it might have been a different thing. But I was
maybe.
on Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six Vegas,
Oh yeah, I
which
know.
was, that's a first person shooter.
Yeah,
The great thing about it was like I got a lot out of the experience. Like
sure.
one, I got a lot of leadership experience out of that very early in my career. Still, I was able to explore that, but also I got opened up to the whole world of directing actors on mocap stages,
Mm.
and also suiting up myself and doing door entries and stuff like that. So from that perspective, it was all really exciting. It was
Mm.
just that the day-to-day workflow wasn't quite my vibe. I was still very much attached to the idea of the craft of
Yeah.
animation, and that's really where I wanted to be. Yeah.
Yeah. And did you ever work in cinematic, or it was all gameplay animation?
It was the cinematics were done in engine,
Okay.
so it was basically just plug and play of mocap sequences and stuff like that, and then a lot of in-game stuff.
Yeah.
But the team that I was working with was amazing. I had a
Yeah.
great time sort of building relationships with them. I'm still in touch with a number of them now
Mm.
after all this time.
Yeah.
But and now obviously I'm running a studio that with my partner Jalil, that has a heavy investment in gameplay animation and working with our clients on game design and all of
Yeah.
those things. And that's amazing. I love looking at it from this perspective.
Hmm.
But as an animator, it wasn't really my bag.
Yeah. And then I'm curious, what brought you to Weta a couple years after?
So when Meteor went under, when they collapsed, basically I had my Ubisoft and EA experience, which I knew I didn't want to go back to games. And then at that time, the only studio I knew that was doing film work was Meteor. And then now that collapsed. So I looked at my wife and I was like, I think we got to go. I think it's time to leave Montreal and get out of here. Now, I used to work at a company called Tippet Studio in San Francisco,
Yeah, Phil
in
Tippett.
Berkeley, California. Yeah, and that was my first sort of big film job where I got to work on some really high profile films there, and I made relationships there. So I built some friendships there, and those people on their own sort of trajectory had moved to New Zealand to work on the Lord of the Rings films and some other Kong was one that they were working on. So I gave them a call, and without even sending a reel, I didn't have to send any work. They were just
nice.
like, "Why don't you come on
Get
down?
over here."
We're working on this thing with the blue aliens." And so that's it. I had a contract in hand. We sold our house in Montreal and went down there, and it was supposed to be a year and a half on Avatar, which I did as a senior animator, and then we ended up staying 8 years. And my son basically grew up there, and I worked on about 14 films while I was there as a soup.
Wow. I'm curious, what did you work on over at Tippet? Like Hellboy?
Yeah, so I was on my first project when I got there was Matrix Revolutions.
Oh, wow.
Then that was the third Matrix. We did
I
a
didn't even know
lot of
Tippet worked on that. That's
yeah,
interesting.
we did. If you remember the film, I don't know if you would, but there's a huge tunnel chase sequence with
Yep.
hundreds
With
of
the Sentinels? Yeah.
Yeah, so I was working primarily on Sentinel stuff,
Okay.
and then after that, I went on to Hellboy. That was the highlight at the time. I was
For
working
sure.
with a really talented animation supervisor who I then reconnected with at Weta, named Todd
Nice.
Labont, and Todd was my soup on Hellboy, and that was probably one of the best film experiences I had.
The movie's so awesome.
Yeah, it's great. I got to work on, a lot of Abe Sapien swimming
Figured.
stuff and Samael the demon and
That character's so awesome.
awesome stuff. And then after that, it was Constantine.
You got to work
Keanu
on
Reeves.
Constantine.
Yeah, I worked on the I don't remember what they were called. They were the half-headed blind zombie creatures on the Hell Highway.
In the Hellscape. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
man.
Yeah,
That's funny.
You know
ahead,
what
you go
bummed me out
first.
about that? You know what bummed me out about that? That was the
Well-
first time I'd only heard stories about this, but it actually happened to me. That was the first time where my shots got sped up in the movie.
No, really?
Yep, the whole sequence was
Interesting.
sped up. It wasn't just my shots; it was the whole thing. They thought, I guess, it was too slow. He was being chased too slowly, and so my shots got sped up. And I, when you're working in animation, like I'm sure this is with any artistic craft, you know everything about your shot. I mean, it is literally looking into the
like your
matrix
child.
of the. Yeah, exactly, and you know everything about it. And when I saw it in the theater,
wait a minute.
I was like, what just happened? Because it went by like that, right?
Yeah.
And I was pretty bummed about that.
It's like the only thing worse than your shot getting cut is it stays in, but they butcher it. They speed it up. You bastards.
You know something? Throughout my whole career, I have been extremely lucky with not having my shots.
Oh wow, that's
I think
crazy.
Maybe one or two here or there, but never anything that I was super attached to. So that's
so fun fact. I think I said this on stream a long time ago, but Keanu Reeves. Apparently, if he had any movie that he could greenlight, if it was like the one movie he would want to bring a sequel to, out of all the movies he's ever worked on, Constantine, that's the one. Out of all of them, that's his favorite. I find that really interesting.
It was fun, man. It was a great project to work on. I had a blast on it. I ended up leaving. That was one of those experiences where I left a shot in the middle, which I don't think I've ever done before or since, but I had no choice. We were not happy. My wife and I had just had our one and only son, Ezra, and we were living in California and not really jiving with the experience, plus being new parents without friends and family to give us a support network. Plus I was working, 60 plus hours a week or 70 hours a week.
Sure.
So we were like, no, we got to go. After a little over a year at Tippet on those three films, we upped and left, and I left my shot in the middle. It's a shot where they're exorcising the demon in Constantine in the mirror. He manages to get the demon into the mirror, and the mirror goes out.
Everyone sequences,
one of the first, and the mirror goes out the window. And there's a shot where I did all of them going out the window, and as the mirror's falling, the demon is
trying to claw out.
Trying to claw out. And the last shot of that sequence is the mirror smashes on the top of the car, and I couldn't do the shot. I was struggling with this shot so bad, because what happens is you have to convey the idea that the demon is three-dimensional within the mirror, right? So even though the mirror is a flat surface, he's fully three-dimensional inside of it. But then when it hits the top of the hood of the car, they wanted this sense that the demon kind of goes
Right.
into a two-dimensional splat, sort of like just like this thing. And I struggled so much with the changing in the visual perception of space, from it falling away to it getting this 2D splat. And I remember always being bummed, because it ended up going to my supervisor, who's an old friend of mine, Todd, and he ended up finishing it. And I was out the door, not really tackling the puzzle of this shot. And it always stuck with me for years after.
You can bring that to your grave.
Exactly.
That made me think of something that we have. I know there's some studio that are taking shots. An animator is going to block it. Oh, we have to give this shot to an other animator, which is a little bit what happened in this story, but it was a little bit more out of your control. What do you think? Because we talked about Meteor, and for me personally, Meteor is the only place that a manager was like, "Oh, actually, you have too much shot. We're going." And I was like, "Nope, I'm going to finish my shot. Thank you very much. It's a mess. I don't want anyone else to be bothered with." What are your thoughts on having shots sharing in different hands?
Well, I've worked with supervisors. I worked with one supervisor, and I was actually the animation director on that project. So it was an extremely large team. There were about 90 animators worldwide on that project. And I was working with one supervisor who actually told me that he purposefully, this is not production, this is the supervisor, right? He purposefully moves shots around his team as a way of getting his animators to work faster, work harder, so that they don't lose their work. And that was a concept that really repelled me. I fundamentally do not believe in that. I think in my entire career, I've maybe taken 2 shots away from 2 animators. I had one animator who struggled with a shot for 7 months. And at that point, it was time for it to go.
Wow.
And then there may be some other very, specific reasons for why I would do that. But in general, if you get the casting wrong as a supervisor, it's usually because it's a relationship you don't know. It's usually because it's a new relationship with a new animator. You may have looked at their reel or seen some work they did on another project. And so you're making your best guess as to whether that is the right shot for them. Usually I've gotten it right. Very rarely will I get it wrong. But when I do, you then do everything you can to work that animator through the process. And under almost no circumstances would I ever take a shot away. I think that is extremely destructive, not only for the animator, but for a team potentially.
Yeah.
But at the same time that I say that, we are also in the business of making films for other people. And there's a lot of money at play, and there is a practical logistic strategy that needs to be employed. And if you work in visual effects, you will know, anybody in the audience here who works in visual effects, I don't need to tell you that it is a constant state of chaos. It never stops, and often that chaos comes from the client. It may be that they miss a turnover date. Usually a movie, a major film will have, let's say, 5 to 8 turnovers. Turnover being sequences of hundreds of shots, and of course they're working with their editors to design it and figure it out, and then they have to get it vetted. And there's this whole machine happening on their end, which inevitably screws us over in some way, shape, or form. We get shots late. They come in the wrong order. Now that they came in the wrong order, the 6 shots you gave to this person, their schedule's now backwards. How are they going to do that? Then, of course, shots need to be shown in sequence, right? You never want to show a director, green screen, the shot they need to approve, and then, of course, it's editorially contingent on the next shot, but then you don't have that one done either. So there's so many moving parts that over the years I've accepted the reality of that. However, I should also say that I also learned how to manipulate it myself. So I would work with production as a supervisor or an animation director to manipulate that system to some degree so that I could move certain things forward in ways that made sense as chunks and move other things back in ways that made sense as chunks, as long as they were part of the same sort of turnover delivery contractually and they're in that same group of shots. You could work with production. I don't think you ever want production going rogue. You know, you need supervisors who are going to speak up and say, no, if we take that one away from John, then that's going to mess up his flow on the next two shots. So, so I think that there's a certain degree of responsibility that soups and anim directors have to do that right.
Yeah, I have another feedback from many animator in VFX, and mostly animator that are maybe trying VFX for the first time. Maybe they're used to animated feature before that I'd like to have your opinion on, is the fact that by the nature of VFX, it's almost like sometimes you have to you want to make sure to not go in the wrong direction, so you show your shot very early, and sometimes it's too early, so it's being out of circle. Or sometimes they want to make sure, no, we're going to show the director something that is, advanced enough, so we will really see it, and then you go for a long time in the wrong direction. And that's something that we've discussed, and often director from VFX are coming from film compared, let's say, from a director from animated feature that are coming more from animation. So sometimes the blocking is something that they have a harder time to properly see. What is your, and that provides a classic situation of your version 72 is pretty close to your third version, but you've just been iterating for forever. What are your thoughts in general about this perception from many animators that VFX means that you're going to do endless versions of the same shot, and eventually you'll just run out of time, so you'll move on to something else?
Yeah. Wow. I have so many thoughts on this. I mean, I could go on forever. I think that I've had both experiences, right? If you work on a James Cameron film, that entire movie has been prevised for 5 years before you ever got your shot. So when you get your shot, don't change anything. Just make it look good. And if you can stick to that and kind of color between the lines of the previs, you're going to be fine, and you're going to get your shot approved pretty easily. However, I've also worked on shots where I've worked with a director, I'm not going to say names, where I've had 85 different ways in which a character could fall down. And then, of course, by the time they approve it, it does in fact look like version 3. And of course, the approval note is, yeah, okay, fine. And you just want to like kill yourself. So my point is that I think that visual effects or directors of visual effects movies more often come from non-visual effects and non-animation related backgrounds.
True story.
And so for that reason, it can be more difficult to walk them through the process. But like I worked with, Joss Whedon on the first Avengers film, and he knew exactly what he was doing, probably because he, had Buffy and Firefly and all that stuff.
Natural extension to what he's already been making for years.
Exactly. And so you could get notes from him. That's another thing, right? Which is often in animated feature work, you're getting notes either from the director or from, the director is in the building. They're in the same vicinity as you. In visual effects, you're often getting notes from possibly a visual effects supervisor, maybe another animation director on the studio side who then shows to them, who then shows to them, who then shows to them. And so it can be very difficult in that respect. But I guess my point is that we often tell students, right, that the cardinal rule is don't get too attached, and that is the reality both for animated feature work and for visual effects work, because ultimately it's not yours and someone else is paying for it. Do I wish that the pain of doing 75 versions would not exist for people? Yes, of course, but at the same time, you're working through someone else's mindset, and you do develop a skill set around that. So like, at Weta, I could never understand why everybody's blocking looked like polished animation. So blocking would go out and it would be for some other companies like finished. And what I started to discover was the reason for that was because it didn't matter what notes the director gave. If it was fundamentally different than the blocking. The animators there were so talented that they would hammer it into shape. They would figure it out. They would move it and shift it, bake it out on fives, do whatever they needed to do, and they could turn that around real quick. So it does generate a certain skill set to be able to pivot, shift, and adjust, rather than when you have infinite amounts of time and the direction is super clear. So I don't know. There's pros and cons to it. Yeah, I worked on a shot on Tintin for 2.5 years. On Avatar, we had artists working on shots for 1.5 years plus.
It's bad when you're celebrating the birthday of a shot. That's like probably at that point where things get a little bit awkward.
Yeah, I think I had a shot in Tintin where Snowy jumps up on a table and there's a fight between Haddock and Tintin, and Snowy is like on the table. And I think the shot got approved in animation at version 278. Yeah, and that was 2.5 years of working on that shot. And then, of course, you start to question, like, am I really bad at my job? But then you realize, no,
Totally.
It's the chaos. It's just the chaos of it.
Yeah. Something that you mentioned, Aaron, that we're often talking as well is this duality that on one side you need to be, passionate and motivated and inspired enough by your shot to put all the time and energy that goes into it. But at the same time, as you mentioned, it's not yours, and you don't want to be emotionally destroyed when it's being cut or changed or whatever. And sometimes it's a balance that needs to be found, and some are struggling. What would be your advice for one of the animator in your team that might be destroyed because it's version like 78 or is almost done? Oh, there's a new idea, just redo it, or it's cut from the movie, or whatever might be affecting emotionally an animator.
What would be my advice? Well, I think there's a reason why a lot of animators like to have a lot of shots on their plate at one time, maybe 3 or 4 different shots. I think one thing that you can do is switch gears, start focusing your mind on the challenges of another shot. I think that, I think that it takes a certain amount of resilience in visual effects animation. One other thing about visual effects animation that requires resilience is the fact that a lot of it isn't based in reference. When you're working in animated feature work, a lot of the performances are based in reference, which can create an anchor point for the shot. But pretty much every creature I've ever worked on is inspired by a hyena or, the essence of an octopus. But the reality is there's nothing in those videos I can look at that's really going to drive my performance. I sort of just have to pull concepts from it. So, you learn to be really resilient in visual effects because you almost never have all of the answers. In terms of how you deal with it, I think that, I think that it's tough, man, because I would say work on other things if you can. I would probably say make sure you're working in an environment where you have really strong relationships with people. It is a collaborative field, and that can give people a lot of sustenance. It gave me a lot of sustenance, whether it's whiskey o'clock every night of the week at the end of the day, or whatever it may be. But being able to maybe vent a little bit, go to the gym, work out, get your stress out. I think the idea is that you need to come back the next day with a clean slate. That's the key. And sometimes you just have to walk away. I've had animators cry on me. I've had animators just walk out the door because they just can't take it. Of course, they come back, but you come back the next day with a clean slate and ready to go again. So there is a lot of fortitude that you need to build up, I think, in visual effects, because it can be such a crazy sort of workflow.
Which is, of course, a very difficult thing, considering it's a very creative industry, and therefore we bring a lot of ourself to our job, right? I guess that's the hard thing for most artists, is that they need to build some ways, like you said, a mechanism that allows them to detach. Like they have to, I think the key is you need to bring that A game and your personality to your work, but you need to somehow leave it at work. It's almost like a dual. I'm watching Severance right now. I feel like we could take some tips from
I like Severance. Yeah,
that's a great show.
It's a really good show. What I was going to say about that is I think that when you're working in any creative field like animation, I think the direction needs to give the artist the opportunity to do the work.
Mm.
What I mean by that is if the direction infringes on the animator's intuition towards the performance too much, then what you're doing is you're diluting the value of the relationship. The value of the relationship is you're the one doing the work. You've been cast to this shot because you are the right actor for this role, so to speak. So the direction has to allow you to color within certain broadness of lines, if that makes sense. And it's very dangerous to over manipulate performance. If it's not telling the story, it's not telling the story. That's bad. But if you micromanage notes, a lot of supervisors will do that. There are many directors who will do that as well, maybe because they don't quite understand how the process works. But when you do that too much, you're dishonoring the collaboration.
Totally.
And that is the key to the relationship, which is you have to allow people to express themselves through their performance, and you're almost just guiding them. Like I have talked about this many times in the past, which is it's the Batman and Robin relationship, which is the director, the animation supervisor, the animation director, all those people who are giving approvals, they're Robin, they are not Batman. They are the less significant to some degree. I say this with hesitation, but my point is that the superhero is the animator that's doing the actual on the ground work, and what you're doing is you're just kind of steering. Watch out for that falling boulder, Batman.
Shepherding.
Yeah, you're shepherding. And I think that it's very. I've worked with a lot of supervisors that are way too hands-on, and I think if it feels right, you go with it. You don't always have to over critique something.
It's interesting, and I can ask you this because I know you've done both, and I know David, he probably already is anticipating what I'm about to say, but you've worked with actors on a motion capture floor, and there's a very, very interesting correlation between what you just said and like how you should work with animators and how you're supposed to work with actors. Because if you micromanage the actor, the same thing happens. They shut off and they no longer bring their creativity to the floor. They're just going to be like, okay, you know what? Just tell me what you want me to do. And that at that point, you've lost a strong collaborator, and you've just got someone who's going to just paint by number, and they're just going to phone it in, basically.
That couldn't be more right. And I think that when that happens, you better recognize it, because I guarantee you that the quality of work and also most likely the consistency of the character performance across the edit is going to suffer.
It's a retention problem too. That animator may eventually leave, because if you're like that all the time, they don't get to flex those creative muscles, and they're going to become disinterested and they no longer like to work there. And now you've got an even bigger problem on your hands, basically.
Yeah, no question. And I would say, I would probably argue that, I get asked a lot, like, what do you determine is the key aspect of, what do you think is the most important metric for determining the success of a studio? This is what I get asked a lot, especially now in my current role.
Yeah, I would say it's kind of the top of the list for a CEO, probably.
That's right. And for me, it's retention. It has nothing to do with profitability. It has nothing to do with, numbers like that. It's all about retention, which is if I can look at the studio and I can see that fewer people are leaving every year or whatever it may be. Obviously, people are always going to go.
For all kinds of reasons.
For all kinds of reasons. But if your retention numbers are high, it usually means that your artists are fulfilled by the work and they're happy by how they're being treated within the studio environment. They feel like they have collaborative, fulfilling relationships ultimately being the key. If you can't build relationships in the studio and you're not being actively empowered to do so, then your studio is going to fail.
Interesting. That's a good point.
Yes, something you mentioned, Aaron, about micromanagement. I would say, other than obvious toxic environment and all that, probably the number one complaint that I had from animators towards their their client or supervisor or whatnot is being micromanaged. Because as you said, Brent, is the same thing for an actor or an animator. At some point, you just unplug, say, all right, just let me know exactly what to do, and I'm going to execute. And you're looking at time passing by. We also had a lot of animators that were asking us, Aaron, what is needed to become a lead? And obviously we had a different idea, but But to you, how would you describe leadership in general? So someone that is genuinely, that's a good senior animator that is genuinely interested to go into a lead position. How would you describe it? Because there's many that don't have a good perception of how their day-to-day work is going to change. So how would you describe it
I
to
see.
them?
So how their day-to-day, people don't have a perception of how their day-to-day work will change as a lead?
As a lead, exactly.
Okay. Well, so I have a definition, and I feel like I've over the years kind of partly stolen this from Simon Sinek. For anybody who looks at
We won't
content
tell him.
online
We won't
about
tell him.
leadership, yeah, don't tell him. But I think he put it in a way that I really believe in terms of how to define leadership, what I would define leadership as. To me, leadership is a willingness to put yourself at risk for
Hmm.
others. So what that means is when I'm an animator working on shots, the stress that I experience is largely within the context of the critique I get about my shot. When I'm a CEO or someone in a position of leadership, the stress I receive is usually from something that comes from the 150 relationships I'm trying to maintain with people. So those
Compounded.
That's right. So those people have one relationship, which is to me, but I have a relationship with all of them because I am willing to put myself at risk to support the people around me. So
Mhm.
I view leadership as being, if you go online, you can research this. There's something called servant leadership, or there's something called bottom up leadership instead of top down. um, Again, it goes back to the Batman and Robin. I am the least significant person because my job is to make sure that everybody has what they need to be happy, to have a proper work-life balance, to have manageable stress, to be on the shows that they love or are enjoying. And also my job is to get them all training. That is a huge part of my job, which is upskill, upskill, upskill. I believe in creating a constant environment towards training. Now, here's the problem. When you have a traditional hierarchy, you usually have in the job description of the animation lead and the animation supervisor that they are responsible for doing training, right? We all think that way. We go, oh, well, you're a lead, you got to train your team. You're a supervisor, you got to train your team. And that is important. Those people are in those positions because they are in a position to train. But if you stop there, then you'll never really train your teams to the level that they need to be trained, because the problem is they're always going to be the bottleneck. They have to do the show. They have to talk with the client. They've got to give notes. They've got to do all these things. So to me, the best form of leadership is to figure out how to get other people to step up to do training, how to get other people to put themselves at risk. And usually those people always exist in the form of an animator on your
Yeah.
team.
Just to
Now,
be tapped.
if you can tap them, if you can figure out the system that you need to design, which is what we're doing here, to bring those people to the forefront to offer training, like it could be anything. It could be you have an incredible way that you build constraint systems versus you convert step to spline really well, right? And we see that because you're doing the work, but now we want to hone in on it and we want to empower you to put yourself at risk. So the moment they do that, all sorts of things start to happen that people don't even realize. The number one thing that's happening when they do that is they're building relationships. Because now, like me, who has 150 individual relationships, that person now has 30 relationships with the 30 people in their team or on their project or in their department. People gravitate towards them. Oh, I remember when Bill did that training. Let me go talk to Bill about this thing. So you're building relationships. Relationships is leadership because you put yourself at risk to support other people. Now, if everybody can do that, well, now you have the utopia of animation studios, right? So that's what
Makes sense.
leadership is. It could be anything from an email to the team or a wiki document to a live Q&A to suddenly finding yourself in a lead position. And you're not in a lead position because you animate well. That is important. Yes, you must be able to do that. But you must also have developed, prior to getting into that position, a full kaleidoscope of different skill sets, from communication, vulnerability, active listening, all sorts of things that at the ground floor, when you are an animator, your company should be empowering you to flex those muscles.
Let me ask you a really big question, really quick. In your opinion, in the industry as a whole, do you feel like we're in a deficit for good leaders?
Oh my God, that's such a hard question. I
Yeah.
don't know. I don't know. Do I feel like we're at a
In
deficit
your
for good
experience,
leaders?
and like just in general, because you've worked in a lot of different industries, do you feel like
Okay,
on
I've got an
average?
answer.
Okay, go.
I have an answer for that. No. What I'll
That's
tell
what I
you is
figured.
that we're not in a deficit for good leadership. I think we're in a deficit for studio leadership to understand how to best utilize people.
Hmm.
So, in other words,
Interesting.
in theory, we're in a deficit, but that doesn't mean it's because those people don't exist. It's because the systems that are being designed, I think, in studio, like, you want to know what leadership takes? It takes a hell of a lot of effort that has nothing to do with the execution of the show. It takes a lot of time, a lot of money, and a lot of input from the upper management to enforce that philosophy around leadership that I just finished explaining. And I
Yeah.
think that that's really hard to do when the
Totally.
shit hits the fan and everybody needs to rally to get this project done. It's hard to remember, wait a minute, we're also taking care of people here and
Mhm.
they need to feel fulfilled by the craft. So I think if more studios do that, then more leaders will appear. So the deficit's not there, it just happens to inadvertently be there because we're not tapping into it.
Interesting.
So I'm curious, at Steamroller, are you guys providing leadership training to
Yes.
newly promoted? Because
Yep.
that's something that we've discussed before, and for us, it was what the worst case scenario. That is often the scenario that we often say, hey, you're a great animator. Do you want to make more money and be a lead? All right,
Hmm.
there you go. You're a lead. And then,
Yeah.
first of all, they were often, sometimes they were meant to be lead and it's amazing. But other times they were just meant to be amazing animator.
That's
And
right.
they don't have the skill set to
Yeah.
properly, lead other human being.
Yep.
So much for the
And
kaleidoscope, in other words.
yeah,
Yep.
exactly. And there's no training. There's nothing given by the studio to say, oh,
So
okay, let us prepare you for this new role.
yeah, so that's a really, really good point. And uh, to me, at Steamroller, we're constantly training in leadership. So I've done numerous lectures since I've been here, plus any new animator that's going into a leadership role, they have a curriculum that they go through with our heads of animation that we've been doing for a long time, where they learn how to communicate and how to listen and how to read body language and how to give notes and how to focus on priorities of notes, right? Sometimes you don't want to look at blocking and the first note out of the person's mouth is, let's fix the spacing on the pinky. This is not a good note for this particular phase of the animation. So we work on all of that stuff. But I should also mention that we do something unique, I think, anyways, at Steamroller, which is we. We have leads, people who step into lead roles, they're actually immediately compensated for that effort. So what that means is we basically vet them through the process. So if someone goes into a lead role for, let's say, 6 months, they're being compensated for that extra performance in that role above and beyond their normal rate. Excuse me. During that time, we evaluate their performance. We have, a way that we will evaluate and give them feedback on that, and make sure that they're growing from that role, so that usually what they want to do is, because they'll do it for a period of time, and usually what they'll want to do is they'll leapfrog. They'll want to go
Mm,
from lead to animator to lead to animator to lead to animator. I think that's the healthiest way to do it.
mm,
And if you can create that environment, then great, because ultimately, in the end, most animators want to always be keeping their craft up and they want to be developing their craft, and they get worried, oh, well, if I'm a lead, does that just
totally.
mean that I'm always giving notes and I'm never really animating? You want to make promises around that, which is to say, well, we'd like you to do this lead thing for this. You don't have to wait a year for your annual evaluation where we'll give you $1 extra an hour and you won't really know why. We're going to give you this much every time that, throughout the whole process that you're doing this, so you feel validated and valued for the work that you're doing from a compensation standpoint. But also, we're going to evaluate your performance
Mm.
regularly through that, so that we can give you guidance, and then, yeah. So
doing it that way would also stop that inevitable problem from happening where the leads get crushed because they're trying to do both those things at the same time, trying to stay up with their craft and get their own shots done, but also support their team. Because if you're like, as to put it the way you said it, if you're willing to put yourself at risk and put your team first and make sure you're unblocking them all the time, most people are going to be spending a lot of their time putting out fires and helping out wherever possible during the day, and then doing their sort of their shots at night. So this is a much better approach in my mind, is that just allow people sort of to, be either all on or off, but sort of, balance it a little bit back and forth, like you said.
absolutely. Yeah, and I would say, the demographic at our studios, we have a lot of young talent. And I think that if you bog them down with leadership for too long,
Yeah.
they start to get, they just don't end up being happy with that, because they want to
No.
always be improving the craft. That's really, really important.
Yeah. There was something else that came up a while ago. I really wanted to talk a little bit more about. It was you'd made a really interesting observation about shot handovers. The idea of it's usually at the last resort. It's typically very destructive, especially if you're a supervisor, when you have to take a shot from somebody. But even when you try to avoid it, there are circumstances where it's going to happen. I'm curious if you have any notes from your many years of experience from both sides of that equation on how to have a healthy perspective, and or how to orient yourself in a very healthy way to that possibility. Like, how, as a supervisor, could you facilitate the turnover? What are the key things to do with your animator, and vice versa? If you're the animator and you have someone that wants to, because it usually becomes this sort of, and from my perspective, this unspoken awkward thing that a shot's being taken away, and I know the animator's now festering, thinking,
Okay.
am I getting fired tomorrow? Like, what's going on? So talk a little bit about that, because I think a lot of people that are listening right now could learn a lot from that.
Yeah, so there are a few things around this. So number one, I think that the best animation supervisors or animation directors understand the balance between the people factor, the emotional side of being an artist and a collaborator, and the fact that we're doing a business, right? There's a business here. There's a financial machine around this. However, when I say that, I also say that throughout my whole career, I like to think, anyways, hopefully nobody in the audience is going to tell me I'm wrong about this. I believe that I always err on the side of fighting for the artist, always. So what that means is, if there is ever a scenario where a shot needs to go from an artist's plate, number one, there is a sit down in-person conversation. It doesn't just happen where it disappears from their shotgun or whatever, and they don't know what the hell's going on. That should never happen. There should never be a mystery or a worry there. So it's a sit down conversation. Usually the sit down conversation, again, because I'm trying to protect the animator as much as possible, usually it won't be, you're losing this shot, John. It'll be, hey, John, you have 5 shots. Which one do you want to lose? Because I can't keep all 5 with you. Okay. So then now what you've done is and again, this is wherever possible. It may not always be the case, but now what you've done is you've given them control. Okay. Because now what it's about the logistics of getting the business side done, which they'll understand because it's not about them. Right now, that's different from having a conversation with them where, in fact, their casting is wrong and there is an emotional aspect to this. That's obviously a different conversation. But 99% of the time, they will walk that path with you because they get that the movie needs to be done. And so you'll give them a choice of what they want to lose. Usually, they won't want to lose anything that is editorially connected with another shot they're doing. We always want those shots on our reel. We want to see a run, right? So that's the first thing. The other thing is that I'll even work my ass off to see if I can get deadline extensions. So bid day increases. So I might go back to the schedule and I'll go, you know what? These shots, they're all library shots. We can start with run cycles. We can start with walk cycles. We'll customize on top of that, but we just saved a couple of days getting something started. So, the bid days on those shots, we can actually shrink them a little bit. I'd like to take those bid days and add them to Bill's shot, give him a couple of extra days on that. Now he only has to lose this one. So it's a puzzle system that's designed around protecting the artist. You always want to protect the artist, because if you lose them, you lose everything, right? Now, on the emotional side of things, when it's a casting mistake, I usually just apologize. In other words, it's my fault. It's not their fault because I miscast them. Now, what I'll often do there is I'll say, what else do you want to work on? what type of shots can I give you? Not obviously this type, because you've been miscast for that. What other stuff can I give you that will be really cool for you to, it's like a negotiation, and I want to negotiate as much as possible. Obviously sometimes you don't always have those luxuries, but I guess my point is that any super anim director out there, you always want to approach the problem from the sensibilities of the artist and not from the sensibilities of the logistics of getting a movie done, and then that becomes your more last resort, which is, we have no choice, I'm so sorry, but this has to happen this way. I don't know if that makes sense.
It does. It does. It's a tricky issue, right? I mean, because like you said, sometimes it could be a miscast. Sometimes it's even just a matter of the bid was done wrong. I've seen that happen a lot, where it's like somehow a week was given to a shot that really it needs like 3 weeks. Like for some reason, it's like they got the same. It's like it's a crowd of characters. They're all holding hands, singing "Kumbaya" around a campfire. It's like this is not the same as a shot with like just a talking head of one person. You know?
Oh yeah,
and I've seen it happen before.
Yeah, and I didn't even realize the bid day issue was on the table for this part of the discussion. But if we're talking about bid days,
throwing it in there.
I'd say, yeah, and I just caught it because I'm like, that's probably the majority of issues that will happen, which is studios. Obviously, you know, we've all heard about how, you know, there's a race to the bottom, right? We've all heard the studios undercut each other, they underbid each other because they want to get that work in and build a relationship with a client. Bids have dramatically decreased over the years, especially with, you know, streaming services coming in, that have kind of shifted the paradigm from long sort of feature work to something a little bit more in the middle. But also you have to remember that when you're an extremely large studio, you have bidding producers, and bidding producers are largely trying to bring in the work. You know, they've got some algorithmic matrix stuff that kind of looks at the script and says, 3 characters, 8 days, 2 characters, upper body, 2 days, you know, whatever it may be. And often they get it wrong. Okay. All the time. In fact, they get it wrong. But that to me is not, just to be clear, I don't think I've ever taken really shots away because of bid day issues. I think bid day issues are the responsibility of the production to know from the soup or the director where the problem is with the bid days on that shot, and then you beg, borrow, and steal to pad the days out on them.
So that's a negotiation you're having with production, so it doesn't even end up as part of the animator's problem, basically.
It shouldn't. I don't recall ever going to an animator and saying, hey, I've got to take this away from you because it's only 2 days long. That doesn't usually happen. Usually it's like, hey, we need this done in 2 days, but you and I both know that's impossible. So just go ahead and get started, and I'm going to go to bat for you and get more time. I mean, that's usually what happens.
Aaron, I want to acknowledge to our audience that you've mentioned, you know, as a CEO and all that, but I want to acknowledge that actually today is the day that you've been promoted from CCO to CEO of Steamroller Studios. So congrats for that.
Thank you.
And there's something on the website that I feel that was very relevant for this conversation, and even more relevant now that you're CEO. And I quote on the website, Aaron's philosophy and drive are exactly what this industry needs to propel itself in the future. So where do you see the industry evolve? What is this future looks like for the animation industry, you think? Let's project ourselves 10 years from now. What do you think will have changed in that period of time?
Well, so that's a wide open question, because I could talk about technology, or I could talk about, you know, the way in which we do the craft. Do you mind if I gear it towards what I want to talk about?
Yes.
Okay.
Please.
So I guess what I would say there is, you know, I always imagine the CEO of a company as being, you know, that person that sits up in their tower, you know, and they're old, and they make life-changing decisions for the staff,
and they have a beautiful couch to anyone that is coming in to
and you know, they make massive decisions that affect the lives of the people that work in the company. But the problem is that the people in the company don't really ever understand the logic behind the decisions. And so really what I'm talking about is a disconnect, right? There's a disconnect in communication between, like I said before, the superheroes that are on the ground doing the shot work and the people who are running the operations of the business itself. And for me, that is a very different thing because I came up as an animator, and there are only a handful of people. You, David, you have a studio, and Jalil, and there's not many people who have come up in the craft working on shots day to day. I've done 105-hour weeks on films, like 7-day weeks, 3 a.m. to 7 a.m. So um, my point is that what my goal is personally is uh, I want to run Steamroller in a way where in 10 years from now, I know that people are coming from all over the world to work with us, not because we have cool shows and do cool animation. That's always a goal for anybody, is to work on the best, coolest stuff. I want people to come because they know that we're going to constantly train and develop their craft, and we're always going to be listening. That's the main key for me, which is I want to figure out if there's a magic system, which we are currently developing here and have been for about a year, a magic system that can somehow, with a growing company where the hierarchy naturally grows with scale, that is just the logistics of it, somehow squashes that to a flat communication system. In other words, what I mean by this is that I want people to come because we are actively engaged in dialogue with them
Mhm.
all the time. When I say all the time, I don't mean every minute, every day. I mean, obviously I'm being realistic here, but
Yeah.
the dialogue is what's really important to me, because I've never been more fulfilled in my craft when, in leadership, when I can directly help someone fulfill a goal in their
Mhm.
journey, whether
Yeah.
it's promoting them into a new role, whether it's giving them more money in a responsible way, whether it's getting them onto this project or that project. It's like the dialogue for me is the most exciting part. And so I want to create a system, and that is what we are doing. And I think quite successfully so far anyway,
Mhm.
where that dialogue is there. Because my past experience in previous studios has been wonderful, but I have never felt connected to anybody in upper management ever. I
Yeah.
have no idea what they're
Hmm.
doing, why they're doing it. Whereas what we're trying to do here is we're trying to constantly be accountable for our
Hmm.
relationship with our staff. And the accountability requires us to be proactive. We don't want to be reactive. I want to have a system where I always know what's going on, or at least if I don't know what's going on, I'm giving everybody the opportunity to tell me what's going on. If they choose not to, they choose not to, but the opportunity is there. And then I
Mhm.
can react.
Well, it sounds like you're just applying the same rule that you have with animation supervision, basically to executive. I mean,
That's right.
basically, it's the same thing. It's about you're now putting yourself at risk
Putting
for now
ourselves at risk.
literally everybody there at the company, and therefore that means there needs to be a two-way conversation street there. Otherwise, how do you do that, right?
But
Yeah.
and that's, you nailed it on the head there, Brent. And the hard part is that it takes an enormous amount of effort.
Oh, for sure.
Um, that leadership that leadership philosophy is extremely time consuming, and it's
Yeah.
extremely expensive. And the reason we're doing it is because of how much we believe that is a metric that
Mm.
correlates to
Yeah.
profitability and
It's
success.
part
If
of the
we
secret
can
sauce.
It's the secret sauce, and most studios, I think, can forget about that because logistically it just becomes so hard to manage it all
Oh,
that you're more focused on the status quo rather than this
right.
leadership stuff, which feels like extra. For us,
Yeah.
it has to be infused into everything we do.
I think it's a really
Yeah.
good observation, is that feeling of it is an enormous undertaking. So people tend to, because it's chaos production, right? You tend to fall back into the sort of the typical defensive scenario of dealing with the status quo, because that's somehow it's a reactionary role rather than a proactive role. And it's hard to put out fires when at the same time as sort of looking for smoke. It's very hard, right? So you have to, I guess your strategy is basically find a way to do that. Find a way to
Yeah.
enable people like you to be able to be doing that at all times, rather than fall into that reactive role rather than the proactive
Yeah,
role.
and I tell the staff too. I tell them, I don't care about the fire. The fire is always going to happen. It's
Yeah.
never ends. It's
Mm,
all one giant sequence of fires. It's
mm,
how we pivot. It's the pivoting, because what a lot of people don't realize is that let's say David, right? I'm going to use you, David, as an example. David comes to me and he goes, "I've got this problem." Okay.
He's
And
always got problems, David.
he's always got problems.
Yeah.
Imagine if the system is such that I can hear the problem, and by the next day, the next few days, whatever it may be, something very reasonable to both David and I solve his problem. And if I can't solve his problem, I can at least explain to him why I can't solve the problem, and I can half solve the problem. Whatever it may be, David now knows what's happening. Whether it's what David wants or not, it's the fact that I did what I did that builds David's trust to me, which is it's the appreciation that I've had people where I've had a conversation with them. And then as I'm walking away and I'm halfway down the hall, because of something that I like to talk about, which is inner dialogue, this is the number one leadership trait. Number one leadership trait for any leader is inner dialogue. If you don't have inner dialogue, you can't be a good leader. But anyways, I'm diverting a bit. So I walk down the hallway, and in my head, I'm going, how did I sound when I said that word? What was my tone like? What was their body language? Did I express it correctly? If at any point I don't feel that I got something right, I do an about face and I go back to that person. And I go, hey, I'm really sorry if I said it that way. I didn't mean it like that, right? And a lot of the time they'll go, oh no, I didn't think anything of it. But it's not the point of whether I got it right or not. It's the point that they look at me and they go, I'm thinking about them. I'm thinking about this relationship.
Yeah.
That's something that I want us to always be doing as a studio. And that is something that we want to train in our people and in the way we think about things.
It's interesting.
Yeah. I think it's very smart, and it's where it's one of the main things that's going to differentiate the studios that are going to have success, I think, for a long term. It was not that much part of the discussion, I would say, even just 10 years ago, but especially now with the shortage of a good labor that we have, because entertainment is exploding in general, plus the fact that now with remote work, a lot of very good artists now the doors are open that they can work with pretty much any studio that they want. So this bond that you will create with either a specific client or your employer or your supervisor, but this, instead of just feeling that you're an employee that is paid for this specific task, is going to make a huge difference for retention.
And that's the huge challenge, though, isn't it, David? Because you're looking at COVID, right? And you're looking at this complete shift in the way in which we do business with each other and with our clients. And you would think that with the working from home situation, we know that when it started, studios started immediately seeing two things. First thing was an increase in efficiency, right? You're not bogged down with hallway chatter, go to the coffee, bump into someone, hey, how you doing? It's like suddenly people started actually working more effectively because they could be alone in their home and getting their job done. That was the majority, which was production did not slow down. If anything, it did just fine in getting these projects done. On the flip side, there was the isolation, which is culture had a direct and immediate impact inside of every studio, which is people felt distance, they felt disconnected, they didn't feel like they were able to have relationships with people. So for us, the key was, how do we maintain culture in a working from home environment? And that's what we've been doing. We've come up with a number of strategies that we think are successful in keeping people connected to each other. I'm not going to tell you all of them because they're hours right now, but we'll continue to develop them. But no, I'm just joking. We found ways of bringing people together online that are fun and informative, and simulate the environment of being in a cafe,
social.
The social environment that we all need and crave so much. And I think that that's a very important part of the leadership mentality shift that has had to happen during COVID, which is, well, we talk about leadership as putting yourself at risk. Well, how do you do that when people are just alone in their rooms somewhere?
That's right. That's right. Yeah. What's funny about that is I feel like before COVID, there's some studios that were already taking that as a very serious thing. They were making sure that there were cinq à sept, or like make sure that they had regular moments where the team could interact without work. Just like, right. Can we have people bond and be able to celebrate the humanity of people working together and collaborating as artists? And I feel like those companies probably pivoted very nicely because it was already part of the culture, right?
Yeah, and I'll tell you what we do. We do something at Steamroller called Let's Chat. And so what a Let's Chat is it happens on every project across the company on Monday mornings. And it's only 15 minutes long. It can't be longer than 15 minutes because then people start to perceive it as a meeting. We don't want it to be felt as like a meeting. And what the Let's Chat is it leverages Zoom's breakout room function.
Right.
So basically, we pull everybody into the lobby. Once we have almost everybody, because Let's Chats are optional, we don't force people to do it. We then have the person who's organized the meeting break out everybody into groups of random 2-people rooms. So suddenly David and I pop into a room together. Hey man, how you doing? I don't really know you, but how's your weekend? And we form a conversation over the course of a 5-minute period, and you can see the countdown on the 5 minutes. And what it allows me to do is get to know David because he's on my show, and I never talk with him because we're both working from home. Then after the 5 minutes is over, we all get spat out into the lobby, and then right away the coordinator or whoever it is does the exact same thing but with groups of 3, because the group of 3 dynamic is fundamentally different than the group of 2. Here you start to see
Totally.
people who might slink away a little bit more, maybe just listen, be more of a fly on the wall. Different types of personalities happen here. Everybody gets spat out after 5 minutes. Bye, everybody. Have a great day. Meeting's over. And the idea is you're just trying to simulate that environment of bumping into people at work, and someone decides you're making coffee in the
Totally.
cafeteria or whatever. Yeah, and we found that it has been extremely successful in getting people to know each other on their teams.
That's awesome. Aaron, at this point in the conversation, we typically try to go to chat and see if they got anything to pick your brain about.
There was a lot about Shia LaBeouf in here. I didn't understand.
That was my fault. It was the shot you were describing of the mirror. I just wanted to know if anybody in chat knew who was in that cab where the mirror shatters.
Oh, it's Shia LaBeouf in the cab. Yes,
he was very young Shia LaBeouf was in that movie. Okay, so actually we have a couple here. One is from actually our very own Scott. I'm going to bring it up. It is, you mentioned questioning if you were a bad animator. That was earlier in the conversation when you were like, it was, taking a little long, like it was like 2.5 years like that for that one shot. You're starting to wonder whether maybe you're just really shitty at it. What are your experiences with this? What are your personal experiences with imposter syndrome, and how do you overcome it?
I think probably the majority of people at some point or another have imposter syndrome.
Everybody.
I feel like my whole career has been imposter syndrome. I keep having new opportunities, and I'm like, how did this happen? Is that because I was really bad at the last opportunity?
Yeah. And now when you get a CEO, you get to question it all over again. You're like, what am I doing as a CEO? Like, how'd that happen? Amazing.
I remember something that I think it was Bobby Beck from Pixar, Animation Mentor.
Yeah.
I think, and God, I hope I got this right. So hopefully I won't get chastised if I got it wrong. But at a presentation that he gave at Ubisoft in mid 2000s, he said something that stuck with me my whole career. And I fundamentally disagree with it. I've decided that I disagree with it. Yeah. It took me, I guess what I would say is that it fascinated me at first, and then I took a lot of time to think about it, and it kept coming back into my mind. And I do not agree with it now. I've come to that conclusion. And it was that, I think he said something along the lines like, at Pixar, you're only as good as your last dailies. And I couldn't disagree with that more. I think that that's wrong. And the reason why I say that is because I don't think that your value as an animator is determined by the moment of praise or the moment of critique. In other words, when I'm like, I wrote an article, which I'm going to rewrite now because I read it recently and I hate the way I wrote it, but it's called The Emotional Animator. And this notion that in a collaborative creative industry, we're constantly being bombarded with comments about how good we are or how bad we are. It happens constantly. And so, I remember, let's say on Tintin, probably that shot with the dog for 278 versions, when it got approved, the director Spielberg said something like, this is now my new favorite shot in the movie, put it in the movie. And so now I'm walking around and I'm completely validated, right? I'm high-fiving. I'm like, it's like the music is playing, and I'm like, I feel like I have value. And the next day, literally the next day, I get a huge reblocking note on my shot. The note says something like, this is wrong. This is not what we're doing, whatever it may be. And what do I do to myself now? Now I go all the way to the low. I'm bad.
Totally.
I'm not good. Okay, well, that can't be real, can it? I
Can
mean,
you be the same? Yeah. Can you do both those things at the same time?
Yeah. So we spend our entire careers on this emotional wave of highs and lows and highs and lows. And it's very exhausting for some people. Like me, I consider myself to be a sensitive, emotional person. I'm highly empathetic. And so when I had to go through that throughout my career, it was exhausting for me. It would really bother me. And I spent a lot of time thinking about this. Well, how can I be both? How can I be one day and the other day? How can I be only as good as my last dailies, right? It's the same concept. So what I decided on was that I'm not. I decided that my value is based on the fact that I always have the intention to do my best work. The fires, the technical pitfalls, the ambiguity of direction, whether they said the right note to me in exactly the way they meant it, all of that stuff has nothing to do with me. What I have control over is my passion for the craft, my desire to train, to learn, to be the best that I can be. That's my value. When you get lazy, when you don't care as much, when you watch YouTube for half the day while laying some loose keys, okay, this is where you can be objectively determined as not good at your craft because your active effort in it is only half as much as what it probably should be.
Right.
So my point is that imposter syndrome is a meaningless question. The question you have to ask yourself is not, are you really good or are you really bad? The question you have to ask yourself is, do you really care? Because if you really care, you will just get better. It's just a logical kind of curve, right? Which is, I don't believe someone just plateaus forever. I think they probably just stop being that interested for whatever reason. Then you plateau.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does. It does. I like it. We should get Bobby in here. We could have like a debate, like a Thunderdome
No,
match.
no. I love Bobby. I don't know Bobby, but I love Bobby. I don't want to have any debates. Listen.
A follow-up question would be: do you think because his perspective might be from his experience? Maybe certain teams do value that a bit more than others. Like you're because what you're saying kind of challenges my perspective on how some companies value their own people. Like I think that.
Yeah, and also just to say this was 15, 16 years ago.
Yeah,
so,
that's true.
What was said then might be very differently perceived
very
now.
true.
The other thing that I would also argue, which is to me, what I value more out of an animator is the overcoming of the note, not whether they got it right or wrong. It's like, again, like I've got animators that I've worked with where they have trouble showing stuff early and often in dailies because they're worried that it's not perfect enough.
Yeah.
And totally. I explain, well, the moment you made a decision to make it perfect, you already fucked up the relationship with the person you're working. Am I allowed to swear? I'm not allowed to swear. Yeah. So you've dishonored the relationship. I don't want it to be perfect because you've cut me out. I don't want to be cut out. It's a collaborative craft. Allow me to work on this with you. That's part of the process.
Yeah.
So to me, when you come back and show the note hit maybe the next time or maybe even 2 times after, that has more value to me than whether you got it right the first time. Obviously, if you got it right the first time, we're all happy. Great. But,
David, you were going to say something, I think.
Yes, but I see question coming in and I see the time. So
sounds good.
Yes, I'll let you bring in the other.
I have another question here. It was a follow-up from the very the grenade question I threw it on your lap a little while ago, which is like, if you're a supervisor and you need to have a conversation with an animator when you have to take away their shot, and you had said, well, like one of the first go-to things you do is ask them like, look, you got 5 shots, which one, because we got, we just have to unblock things and rebalance the load a little bit. And of course this hot number came in and contest to that. What if that animator only has 1? I guess it just brings you to that other one of those other conversations, right?
That's right. Then it's a casting issue.
Yeah.
If they've only got 1 and it's got to go, it's a casting issue. Usually if it's a casting issue, it's never their fault. That's the key thing to remember. If your supervisor is having that conversation with you, they better damn well be apologizing.
They got to own up to it. Yeah.
Yeah, because they got it wrong. And then what they need to do is they need to ask you, what else can we challenge you with? Because this isn't it. We're going to work on this over time. We'll come back to this another time and help
Totally.
you figure things out. What do you want to do? Again, it's always about the relationship, which is, you know, when your parent says you can't have that, and you have no control, you don't feel valued in the relationship. But if you can create dialogue, that is the key to building trust, even though it might not be what the animator wants to hear.
Totally. That's some golden advice right there. Okay, I got another one in here, which is, okay, so this is going to go right to the core of everything here. What is your advice for beginners, for beginner animators to grow fast? So I guess if you had like your top 3 things that they should focus on when you're just starting out, what would those things be with all, you know, the perspective you have now looking back on those?
So would I be assuming that this is a beginner animator working in a studio or just at their home on their own?
Let's assume not. Go ahead, David.
I was just going to say that's a junior animator that is starting and wants to become a let's say good senior, but rapidly.
Yeah. Oh no, this is saying student.
Okay, then go that route then. Yeah, popped up at the end. Yeah, okay. So
is it Taha animation that's
yep.
Student. Okay. So I assume then if you're a student, well, obviously you have to devour, right? I mean, you have to devour information. You have to devour information. You have to, I would probably say the biggest hindrance that most students have is their workflow is flawed. And that's the worst sort of start you can have, is if your workflow isn't a clear path. You might not be good at it, but you at least need to know what the right workflow is. So I think workflow is something that you really have to focus on, because if you can get it right, even though you may be slow and sloppy, it will get refined over time and become something that you can be really, really good at. There are a lot of student animators that come out of school that have really, really poor workflow. And so, you know, you always get that thing where, you know, if you open their Maya scene, you'll just go, you know, you'll like, oh my God. And then of course, the problem with that is that they can't adapt to notes. That's the key issue, which is you have to build your animation in a way that you can adapt to the notes. What else? I would probably say anatomical and reference analysis is really, really important.
Oh, yeah.
I would say you don't need to be a good artist, but you need to be able to, you know, overlay annotations on top of reference to understand line of action, to understand the strength in a pose. So having an understanding of muscle, bones, anatomy, those sorts of things is really important. A lot of animators just want to, like, you know, look at even if it was feature animation where it's a human acted performance, there's still a lot of anatomical things that are happening there that are very important for you to understand. So I think diving into anatomy is very important. You know, in VFX, we spend half of our time looking at the muscle structure of leopards and cheetahs and understanding how they digest food and gestate, and, you know, all of these things. Like, anything you can do to develop your understanding of how something lives and breathes on the planet is important towards feeding your animation mindset. I would also say talking a lot about animation in terms of how people do things. Reach out to people in your network. If you can make friends with people on LinkedIn, at a conference, you know, and you can tap people for how they tackle challenges. Anything along the lines of training is really, really important. That's why I asked about studio versus student, because for us, we've done so much training in the last year that I know our talent is growing exponentially. They're all growing because it's just there. But when you're alone at home or you're working in an online class, you kind of have to really go out and do it, as opposed to having a studio do it for you or provide it for you. So it takes a lot of initiative. I mean, you really have to be hungry and devour information. Also, I would say practice, just all the time. Just keep challenging yourself. I would say if you want to go into visual effects animation, you really need to understand quadrupeds. That is very important. If it's critical to being able to get work in that environment. I don't know. Am I missing anything, guys?
No,
Help me out.
That's good. I really like the whole devour part, because that's something I often say is develop a healthy appetite for information, because you're going to have to, I find a lot of animators, they just kind of half look at references, or like they don't really do their homework on a shot. They just sort of start moving things around. And I feel like they're kind of missing the forest for the trees in a way. Like I feel like it's like part of animating me is the experience of devouring and consuming and like understanding the depths of what you're animating as opposed to just starting to move stuff, you know?
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more, which is if you're ever in a position where you're moving stuff and you're looking at you're thinking to yourself, why am
Yeah,
I making
why?
this pose?
Yeah,
You're not in a good place.
100%.
Yeah, you should, and I think that that's something that like I think you should always be annotating on reference. I think it's very, very important because it will be done for you by supervisors and animation directors. We do it less in visual effects than we do in feature anim. In visual effects, by the time I started doing it actively, as an anim soup, my drawing skills were already so terrible that
Mm.
it just looked like giant penises all over the place. But I got better with it over time. But my point is that to break down the mental approach to animation, you should be able to look at something and on any given frame, a key pose, you should
Mm.
be able to sketch on top of that and understand what is the spine doing,
Mm-hmm.
what is the hip line versus the
Yeah.
shoulder line, the contrapasso, whatever. So yeah, I think that's all
The
very
what
important.
and the why, right? The purpose of those, because everything is doing something for a reason. I think people forget that it's not there.
That's
The
right.
spine's not just doing a thing just because it feels like doing a thing. It's usually because there's a purpose for it. There's some sort of motivation behind it. I have one last question. It wasn't an official question, but I thought it was kind of a nice one to wrap up the stream with, which is if we have anybody in the room here who might want to potentially apply to a company like Steamroller, I assume that you probably have some sort of online submission form for
Yep.
people to. Okay, well, so
Yeah,
I guess
let me. Yeah,
go ahead.
I'll do a little plug.
Yeah, plug it up.
Yeah. So Steamroller is located in Florida. We're just north of Orlando. The company is currently about 200 people. I'd say probably about 40% of that 200 is international.
Mm.
So we have a lot of people who are located in and around the studio, whether they're working from home or coming in every day. And then, of course, we've got people all over the world. We've got people in Canada and Europe and Australia, like all over the place. So for someone who said, can Canadians apply? Of course, you can apply and you can work from home with us. Obviously, in that particular case, you are a contractor and
Mhm.
not an employee. In order to be an employee, you must live within the state of Florida. And we have all sorts of online application forms that you can fill out. I should warn you, we test. So we do not bring people in very lightly. Our vetting process is quite rigorous, from blocking animation. If you pass that, we send you a video feedback from one of our animation
Oh, that's
supervisors.
cool that you do that.
Yep, and then you have to then do the second part of the test, and then if you pass that, we then do an interview and try and get you into the studio if things are looking good. So yeah, we're hiring constantly, any level of animator. We also have a large rigging staff. We have modelers. We've got concept, layout. So we sort of juggle half of the studio, well, more than half of the studio work that we do is service work. So we have clients like Weta Digital and Frame Store and DNEG and various others. We have a lot of gaming work that we do as well with Epic and other companies. And then of course we have our IP. So we are actively working on, now we are just about to come out of pre-production and go into production on a 28-minute pilot episode for Spice Frontier. We made a short, about 7-minute short, about 2.5 years ago, and we believe so strongly in the product that we are developing what we hope will be a TV series.
Very cool.
And so that's our own content. And of course, we've just finished our first video game, Curse of the Deadwood, which will hopefully come out soon. So lots of exciting things here. If you want a diversity of project from VFX animation, feature animation, high-end cinematics, in-game animation, and yeah, we have it all. So
awesome.
That's awesome. Well, Aaron, I think that probably brings us. We're already 3 minutes over. I just want to take a second to sincerely thank you for being here. You're obviously a very busy person, so taking the time out of your day to just hang out with the community is very well appreciated.
This was great, man. This was just perfect time that I needed just to sit with you guys and relax. I loved it, and also I want to say happy Passover to anybody.
Yeah,
I got a happy Passover.
I was going to bring that up. Yeah, happy Passover to anyone observing that particularly awesome holiday. I think honestly we got to get you back in here at some point because there's obviously some big things that are happening in your world, and Steamroller continues to be on our radar because obviously with the kind of stockpiling of talent you guys have over there, it is getting a little bit interesting. So the only thing I'm worried about is you might actually collapse into some sort of supernova at some point. I mean, it may happen. We're going to see. We'll keep a close eye on it.
I don't do supernovas collapse because I
that's the
imagine
whole thing.
we're
They
just
implode
gonna.
and they kind of do this.
No,
Yeah.
no. I don't see it that way. I see us as just constantly expanding and exploding into a beautiful,
happiness.
beautiful cosmos of happiness.
Okay. Well, I'm just saying, like, only so much talent can exist in one singular place. I think you're challenging the universal. Okay. Well, I guess time will tell, Aaron. We'll have to have you back.
That's right. You'll have me back.
We'll
Exactly.
have to find a way of measuring this. I don't know what the metric is, but we'll figure something out.
I told you already. Happiness.
That's right. Okay. Fair enough. Aaron, thank you. Have a wonderful rest of your day. David, have a wonderful rest of your day. And chat. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thanks, Aaron.
Thank you so much for having me, guys. Thank you so much for having me.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Another conversation, another afternoon with an amazing person. As you can see, Aaron is a very well-spoken and very well-experienced individual in the animation industry. We didn't get to touch too much on exactly how we got into it because there's some fun backstories there as well. It sounded like it kind of just happened when he saw some. So I can't remember the story. He was telling right before the stream. Somebody, I think he knew he was visiting a production or something, and he saw like some people were moving like dinosaurs around, and he's like, "What? How is that even possible?" And next, you know, he was getting sucked into this wonderful world we all find ourselves in. So thanks for being here, everybody. It was a great stream, and I think if you were so inclined, you should definitely apply to Steamroller because, as I said, I wasn't joking around. When I saw the talent that's been rolling in there, it's getting a little bit, it's getting interesting, maybe a little bit silly. So I think that they're going to be doing some pretty awesome stuff moving down the road. They've already done amazing stuff, but they will continue to do even more amazing things. Until next time, then, everyone, stay animated as usual. And I don't know, Scott, was there something I was supposed to say? I felt like there was something I was supposed to say at the end of the stream. Scott, help me. Scott, help me is like, God help me, but no, Scott, the Almighty One, has said that there's nothing specific. We have so there is a stream tomorrow. I believe that it was slated as a review night. So I will see whoever wants to show up tomorrow evening for a free evening of reviews. If you're interested in having your work reviewed, for free, and we do this every once in a while, and it just so happens that every once in a while happens to be tomorrow night. Coincidentally, there's a form you can fill out. Scott, I don't know if you can link that form, or maybe you did it earlier, but we have a form and you could submit your stuff. There's no guarantee that it's going to be looked at, but we kind of do a bit of a dice roll to see who gets chosen, and we dig into it. We take a look at 3 usually in an evening, and I try to do my best to give you a taste of what a feedback session would be like if you wanted to order a review from Agora. As you may or may not know, Agora has a panel of experts that you can book to have your work reviewed, and we kind of give these samples out every once in a while just to get everybody get everybody acquainted with what a really good animation review should feel like, so that you can grow from that experience. Next week we have Sean Beishu. We've been having a lot of performers actually on lately. He's sort of yet another in the line of amazing talent that we've interacted with over the years. He's a local stunt performer / like actor. He does both, and he's actually, I feel like he's been in almost every video game production here in Montreal. That'll be fun. He's got crazy stories to tell. He's a very interesting guy. Very, very, very generous and great to have on set. So I'm sure he'll be just as amazing to have on stream. Okay, I think that's it for real. Have a really good day. Talk to you soon, and see you tomorrow night, hopefully. Cheers.